Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Fan Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. Uh-huh. So come get some CromCon. CromCon.
Your favorite podcast, it's Critical Blast.
Hey, we want to shout out to our sponsors, Daytona Beach Comic Con. If you are a fan of comic books, if you're a fan of comic book conventions, and if you like meeting comic book creators and getting comics and comic-related stuff, then you need to make your plans to attend Daytona Beach Comic Con. This year's show is September 9th and 10th. Silverline will be there, so you should make your plans to be there too. We'll see you there. If you like comics and find yourself in the Orlando, Florida area, doesn't everyone come to Orlando at some point in time to see the House of Mouse? But when you're here, you need to make it a point to visit Coliseum of Comics, especially the one on East Colonial Drive. They carry Silverline comics, even a limited edition Coliseum of Comics version of our comics. So, when you go, be sure to ask for Silverline Comics and tell them we sent you. OCD stands for Orlando Collector Deviants. OCD, Steve and Trish. They're a family of geeks who promote geek things, particularly those around the Orlando, Florida area. They're big supporters of Silverline, and we think you should be supporters of theirs too. Go give them some love. If you are an independent comic book maker and you need to get your independent comics made, you need to look no further than Kablam! Kablam Digital Printing. They print our books, and they do a bang-up job. They're not only trusted by Silverline, but many, many independent comic book makers. Head on over to kablam.com and see for yourself just how easy it is to have your comic printed by them. And tell them Silverline sent you.
Hi, this is Tim TK, host of That Silverline Show on Tuesday. Join us at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Tuesday night as we discuss pop culture and the joys of making comics.
And I'm Scott Wakefield, host of Silverline's Wednesday Wham, where we talk about comic books and all kinds of great storytelling, sometimes with incredible guests. And we want you to join us Wednesday nights from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern. We'll see you there.
I'm Roland Mann, and I host Silverline's Silver Sunday. Join me every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern as we make mine Silverline.
Hello, Internet. Welcome to That Silverline Show on Tuesday. I'm your host, Tim TK. You have the wrong banner up. Let me change that real quick here. And I am joined, as always, by Jose Fuentes.
Hello.
And also joined by David Rios.
Hi there.
And tonight we are talking about comics that are based on games. Earlier we talked about adaptations of comics, and now we're going the other way around. The reason we picked this topic is because of the SEO, but also because there's been an interesting phenomenon with video game adaptations where video games that have been turned into movies, with the exception being, the most recent Super Mario, have always turned into hot trash. Even as fun as the Doom movie is, it's not good. But whenever the video game gets adapted into comic, it's usually the other way around. And for the most part, they're pretty good and are well received. A few of them coming out a little lackluster. So we kind of want to talk about some experiences with that, why we think that is, and what sort of things that as a comic creator, you'll need to keep in mind if you're working on an adaptation of a game to a comic. I'm currently being attacked by a cat right now, so I'm trying to keep her entertained.
Mine are still sleeping.
I'll open up the floor first and start with you, Jose. Have you read any comics that are based on video games?
Comics that are based on video games. I did read. I mentioned, kind of sort of mentioned it before we started, but I do have like the original Magic the Gathering, which was, I guess it's not based off a video, it's based off a card game.
Well, it is based off of a game, which I think wouldn't be insanely hard to adapt to a movie.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I didn't understand the comic when I got it until I realized it was what it was based off of. Then I had friends tell me about it.
Nice.
So, video games to comics. Well, that's me on the spot.
Yeah.
Thanks, guy.
Oh, yeah, no. It's also, I'll open up to any sort of game because I would say it's sort of a phenomenon even for tabletop games because we had the original D&D movie with Michael Irons, which is, a series of choices that were made. But the most recent D&D movie is actually pretty good. But the D&D comics, for the most part, have been consistently good.
Yeah. I agree. Like even the D&D one with Marlon Wayans in it. You know what I mean? That one was really goofy, and like I'm like, okay, that's not really. I had to explain to people. I'm like, no. But the newer movie is definitely up there in like, yeah, that is exactly how my friends act when they play our stupid game. Like, oh my gosh, they're morons.
Yeah.
So obviously, you go in with that mentality that this is how your friends play, this is how your friends act as players, then you're definitely going to be entertained when you go see that movie, because I know I was.
Yeah.
But damn it, Tim. I gotta keep thinking. I think I needed to have my agent vet these questions before you pop them out at me. By the way, I don't have an agent, so.
Good.
I don't play a lot of video games, for the record.
Yeah.
That's why this is a hard question for me. David, I tell you.
David, what comics have you read that are based off of games?
I haven't read a lot of them. I know of quite a few of them, but actually sitting down and reading them is something that I haven't had a whole lot of time to do. I know that there's a lot of them, like the Mortal Kombat, which we used to make at Malibu. We used to have adaptations of those. The Street Fighter ones. But actually sitting down and being able to read them is, I really haven't had time.
Sure.
I may have read some of them a while ago, but none of them are really popping into my head.
Sure. Well, I mean, there are, of course, like the weird ones where DC's Injustice and Marvel's Ultimate Alliance were actually based off of the game, which is based off of comics, but these were comic retellings of the game storyline, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, Mass Effect. Didn't Mass Effect have a comic book?
Mass Effect had a comic, yeah.
Yes, I got one.
So did Dragon Age. Yeah, a lot of Bioware properties did. I believe they also made a Knights of the Old Republic comic based off of KOTOR, which got turned into the Revan comic. Legend of Zelda originally had a comic in Nintendo War, yes. I remember the Mega Man comic a little bit down the line. That was a lot of fun.
I remember there was a Mega Man cartoon.
Yeah.
I didn't know there was a comic.
There was the Sonic the Hedgehog.
Sonic the Hedgehog is a huge comic. It's been going on for forever still.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One of my friend's son is such a huge Sonic the Hedgehog fan. He's like, I want to say he's like 11, and he draws a mean Sonic and Knuckles. Like, I saw pictures of it, and I'm like, I was rather impressed.
No.
Nice.
So yeah, I totally forgot about Sonic.
All right. Well, there's also something here which I'm going to share my screen because I want to see Jose's reaction to this.
Oh, let me get my glasses on.
Is another something that's very special to the hearts of those of us on Silverline Tuesday. there's a comic adaptation of something that's very special to us, which I have yet to pick up because it is fairly new.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
So, was it Crimson Thaw is one of the most recent ones out, right? And that one coincides with this 5th edition Vampire the Masquerade. So there are actually some lore in the back of the books that you can incorporate into your tabletop game.
Yeah.
Flipping awesome.
Yeah, it looks so good. I mean, this is volume 1 of the series that started in 2021. Writing staff: Tim Seeley, Blake Howard, Tiny Howard.
Yeah.
Which are all fantastic writers, artists. Dev Premnick, and Nathan Gooden.
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, it looks like a loaded team, and some like the previews. So I'm absolutely I'll be reading this shortly.
That's awesome. Yeah, read because there's right now it's like 2 storylines for it. I think right now there's for the newer ones anyway. There's Crimson Thaw, and I can't remember what the other one is. But I've read them both, and they're awesome.
Okay. So you have read comics based on games recently.
I have.
Yes.
I mean, if we're gonna do that, like role playing games and whatnot, you can go back to like Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I don't remember who put them out, but I remember Jan Dursma did artwork. Jan and Drags Morales and gosh dang, I can't remember his name, but they did artwork for it. I actually have some of those older books.
Yeah.
And one day when I go back to see Jan, when I visit the school, I'm gonna have her sign those for me.
Yes, I mean it's kind of like hit on the point. Like this isn't like a phenomenon that's like only with video games. So just anytime you try to take an interactive medium and adapt it to a movie for whatever reason, it just the way it was adapted came out weird. It's like
sometimes the translation doesn't line up.
Well, with comics, like the old AD ones, like I believe those ones were pretty decent if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
But compare that to the D&D cartoon, which is a fever dream.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's.
I mean, when I was younger, it was awesome. But I don't think it holds up nearly as well. I'm still entertained. I had the DVD. I'm still entertained, but it's like, oh yeah, why did I like this again?
Yeah, no, it's one of those things where it's held up for a different reason. It's based
right.
Like
another one for that for me is Thundar. Just to tie that in real quick, Thundar the Barbarian. Not quite the same as it is when I watched it when I was younger, but that was my first introduction to like post-apocalyptic anything, and that love for post-apocalyptic stuff carries on still to this day.
Right. There you go. Yeah.
Different subject though. Sorry.
I believe there's also. Let me double check this. Yeah. Did you read any of the did you read any of the comics based stuff of oh no, I'm looking at something different. Something different. Okay. I was trying to find something, but I guess that's not what I was remembering it was. No. Okay, no. Did you read the graphic novels based off of Fallout the game?
I didn't.
Yeah.
There's also Warhammer. Warhammer has comics.
Warhammer's a ton, yeah.
Yeah.
The most recent one being in Marvel.
Of course, he had it behind him.
Oh, I do. Yeah. Marvel ended up getting the rights because they weren't happy with the cycle of their previous publisher.
Right.
So they got Karen Gillan, who is a diehard Ultramarines player, to write an Ultramarines book.
That's cool.
And it's pretty good. It's definitely more Warhammer than it is Marvel, but with the production quality you'd assume from Marvel, so it's actually that's a great page.
Art's pretty decent.
Art's pretty decent, and with your patented Warhammer Ultraviolence, just rivers of blood. But one thing that I'll mention here, and we'll get into the actual nitty gritty of stuff. Oh, there goes Martinez Calgar just one-shotting
That's awesome.
gas cultists. Yeah. Yeah, but one thing that I'll get into here, and why I think, and something I think writers need to be looking at when they're adapting an interactive medium to a different thing. Now, why I think comics have as well. I mean, comics have for a long time have had, you know, this weird dichotomy about them. We're like the paradox is that like hero comics and like especially are you have big over the top action, you can do insane set pieces with it, but it's all told throughout a story. I mean, a lot of welcome in, Vic. I mean, a lot of like really good stories. You do have like, you know, a couple pages of insane action, but it's built up with 17 pages of storytelling and plot.
Right.
And you end up crafting narrative around it. And I think, you know, that's when people read a comic, they want to read a comic and have a good story in there to complement the eye candy. And why I think Marty's Color succeeded compared to the Ultramarines movie, which was the thing that happened.
Wait, there's an Ultramarines movie?
Yeah, if you're going to watch it,
yeah,
if you're going to watch it, be 3 beers deep into the night. Yeah, but it's Marty's Color does that where it takes time to tell the full story of this Ultramarine captain and how he got there and what his childhood was like. Whereas the Ultramarines movie just jumps straight into there's guys on this planet sent here to kill a thing. And when you're playing a game, or if you're playing like, you know, 40K or like the tabletop or the Space Marine game, you might assume like the core of the gameplay, what you're experiencing is all the action and violence. And so when people try to adapt that, I think their thought is, well, I need to adapt to the action and violence because that's the core of the experience. And that's how you get the Ultramarine movie, which is just 90 minutes of people shooting each other. Nothing really actually happens. It's just kind of, yeah. But Marty's Calgary is like, no, we're telling a story that's set in the same universe. We're not adapting the experience. We're creating a new experience in there. And I think there's been a pedigree in comics of working with insane eye candy and action set pieces, but knowing you need to tell a story in there. That's why when video games get adapted into comics, the creators already are familiar with the idea of like, well, you can't just have straight eye candy. You need to do a whole lot of storytelling with it.
Right.
Rollership said, yeah, Witcher, exactly. That's one of the things I want to mention is like the Witcher comics are a great example of that, where as a game, Witcher is also very narrative heavy, but the Witcher comics, you'll get a splash or 2 pages in the back of Geralt actually fighting the monsters, or maybe a couple panels in the front of him fighting noblemen who being, you know, jerks as they're wont to do in the Witcher universe. But it's a lot of investigative storytelling and relationship building, and there is a lot of time spent in there. So that way the writer and the artist work together like you see in well done action adventure comics. Whereas, you know, Witcher TV show, good in the second season, but the first season had some of the similar problems where there's a lot of moments where things were built or they just kind of were done flat to get to action.
Right.
And so, and the things
some of that build up is left out.
Yeah. And so the second season is much better, but the first season there was issues with it and it wasn't adapted as cleanly as we hoped. So kind of grab your guys' opinions on what you think goes wrong adapting games and other things, and what you think comics have done right in adapting games, or what do you think comics allow that is different for adapting games, and why it works so much better as a comic adaptation?
Well, I think that you're able to, when you adapt a video game into a comic, you have more not leeway story-wise. I mean, you can, but the transition between, like in a video game, the action and stuff that you can do in the game is easily translated into comic books because you can do the same thing. You can have the artists draw it the same way, right? As opposed to say translating it into a TV series. You know what I mean? You have more room story wise, I think, to the budget around for story wise.
Mm-hmm.
But like to try and get away with some of the stuff you get away with in a game or in a comic, you don't get that physically. You can't get that physically from actors, even if you, depending on how heavy, like say CGI you're using.
Sure.
But I think the transition between the comic book and video games are a lot easier than between video games and say live action.
Sure. David, your thoughts on the same topic?
Sure. Also, I'm gonna share my screen in just a minute. I know Roland likes to have us doing stuff. My opinion on the comic stuff is particularly in ensemble casts where you have multiple characters and stuff, where you follow the video game and most of the time the video game is an end goal for the team and getting to that point. The advantage that comics that they do in comics is they can go through and concentrate and build up more of a storyline for the individual characters. Whether it's an issue or two or an arc with that, is they tend to branch out a little bit more and personalize the people as opposed to the group collective. Yeah. So I see that as an advantage of the comic side of it, a little more expansion. Live action, that one is that varies so much depending on the writers and the directors and and what are they going more towards a cheesy view or are they going through and doing something to more develop the interaction of the characters. It's similar to comics, so kind of a good example of that would be like the newest Mortal Kombat movie. I mean, they really put a lot of depth into the Scorpion's character and the son and all that, and the fight, more of the fight between Sub-Zero and Scorpion, and stuff like that.
Which was a pretty sweet fight.
It was. They had a good way that they brought that around, and going through a lot of that, a lot of the games and following the games, you kind of look at Scorpion as more of your villain type character, at least in the early days.
Right.
And here you got the feel for him and the sacrifice and his family and all that stuff. Particularly the opening scene with that. So that is a good example. But then you start looking at some of the other.
We can even go back and look at like Mortal Kombat 2 from like the 80s or 90s.
Yeah. So you got the easy side on that. So.
Yeah.
But yeah. Go ahead and share this.
Yeah, I mean, definitely get that. And kind of to your point there, David, I think one thing that comics have been kind of put in the comic mindset since the days of Stan Lee is he wanted to have a hero with personal problems because he wanted people to relate to the hero on that level.
Right.
And so because of that, part of the DNA of comics is spending a lot of time making these larger than life characters more relatable and spending time, getting to know them. And that's part of what, makes a compelling story. And I mean, looking back at the Assassin's Creed movie, I don't know if we got to know Michael Fassbender's character at all. It kind of jumps straight into white robes, parkour, stabbing people. We don't know why we're here. We don't know why we're doing it. It's just happening.
Right.
But comics, because you are given, generally more time in a run, to tell more beats than you would in a traditional movie. But also, it's a lot easier to develop a character quicker in a comic, I feel like, because of just the way text is contained and jumping from panel to panel. In one page of a comic, you can cover 2 to 3 scenes from a movie.
True.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely think that adds to, building up the characters, which makes the character more relatable, which makes the story more compelling in general. So we're talking a lot about the writing side of things, but the visual side of things, comics and games, except for tabletop games, are visual mediums. Tabletop games, you can do your own minis or paint your battle maps, however you want to do that. But or theater of the mind creates a visual to it, kind of. But going from game to comic, what are kind of some of your thoughts you think that artists would need to be mindful of when doing that sort of adaptation?
I mean, wouldn't that fall in first? I mean, even as an artist, like the writer, because wouldn't like in adapting it, like say into comics and whatnot.
Yeah.
I would guess that the first person you want to talk to get it, what I mean, to get your feeling across, wouldn't that be like to the writer?
Well, true. I guess the writer also became mindful of it, but in terms of understanding what the visuals are trying to convey, like in terms of mood or something like that, and then figuring out how you need to inject that into your own pacing. But I was thinking more so like in terms of each artist has their own art style. So
Right.
What are your thoughts on of course you never want to fully try and 100% mimic source material, because that's just going to look kind of weird. But
right, you should.
Yeah.
As an artist, you should. I mean, let's see. It should be a discussion had.
Yeah.
With the artist, that way the artist can at least try their best to stay close to the source material. You know what I mean? In regards to you don't want to draw like Altair, you know what I mean, and like make him look like an entirely different person. Say it's Altair, right? You want you people that know the Assassin's Creed video game. They want Altair to look like Altair. So I mean, knowing the source material, regardless of, even if you talk to creator of said source material, or at least do your research for it, you can still do it in your style, but do it in your style. But make sure characters are recognizable. Make sure, I mean, if they're in a particular terrain, that the terrain is understandable. You know what I mean? That it recognizes that they go together, like the terrain, the backdrop of like a video game. Like I said, Altair of Assassin's Creed goes to Jerusalem. You know what I mean? You want it to at least look like medieval Jerusalem when you do it. So you don't have to stick so close to the source material, but at least make it recognizable.
Right. Do some work to maintain their a consistent visual identity.
Right.
Yeah, you also want to be true to the feel and the theme of it. For example, you don't want to take something like what's a good maybe the Fallout games and stuff like that. And the last thing you want to do is turn it into a bright and happy, colorful,
right.
Type of thing. So you want to keep the themes and the feel along with that. And and that's another thing is not only having an artist who's doing it, coming up and keeping that, the thought process and all that is going in earlier and actually matching an artist to that type of style ahead of time. So you're not taking somebody who is, like a Wendy Penny type artist and throwing them on a Fallout book. It's just not going to work. Not that she's not capable of it. It's just, it's such a hard thing for, it's just not the style. So, laying the groundwork, initially getting the right people, and then from there, having the people do their, making sure to keep the feel and look for the book, is all part of, the master plan of coming out with these. So,
yeah, I think it's like along those points. I think also the comics benefit from having less moving parts. Like when you're dealing with a movie and you're adapting source material, Saint Equalizer into God of War. Well,
what was that?
because Saint Equalizer couldn't do God of War. Yeah,
I mean, can you envision God of War in the style of the Spirit?
Yeah.
That would be a little weird.
That'd be a little weird, yeah. But I think, comics benefit from having less moving parts. Like with a movie, if you're doing adaptation of source material, ideally you want, the director, the writer, the leads, the director of photography, the producer, everyone to all be familiar with the source material at least, and also like understand what its goals and intent were.
Right.
With a comic, literally, like, unless they have a dedicated editor, like the most a publisher like would realistically be involved with this is just securing the rights, and then making sure that your writer, illustrator, colorists are all familiar with the material.
Yeah,
and
that would be helpful.
Yeah, like the case with the Marvel adaptation of Warhammer, there's literally just had an editor like email a couple people like, "Hey, who here plays Warhammer 40K?" And Karen was the first one to email back, and that's the time I got the job. He's like,
That's awesome.
Literally, there's a response like, "You got the rights," and then I respond like, "All right, I just need illustrator who's also going to like work with a colorist and a writer. You guys,
Right?
Who's nerds in here?
This guy knows.
Who's not nerds in here?
Right, exactly. But yeah, and much easier to find people who are passionate about the source material with when you only have to worry about a few people as opposed to an entire film crew.
I think that helps. That also, that someone is it's an interest for someone, right? Like if it's not something that catches your interest as a creator, then are you really going to be interested in dedicating time, like actual time and passion to it?
Right. That's the other thing. All right. If you're not making something that you want to read, then
right.
Yeah. We'll wrap earlier, but I forgot that I was going to bring it up here. But of course, not every adaptation is going to be perfect, and every medium has its pros and cons. And I think
something should not be adapted to a site, putting it out there.
Well, something I think is really weird. It has a long run, so it has its fan base, but I'm not the biggest fan of the first volume, at least. Maybe it gets better in the second volume, but the Dark Souls comic, I think, is a weird adaptation. I don't know if it's just due to the nature of storytelling in Dark Souls being so wiki heavy as opposed to being told in game, but something that can happen with comics is a focus on the eye candy, like I mentioned earlier. But the Dark Souls comic is weird to me because it's the eye candy, but it slows it down. It's like the eye candy it feels like it takes forever to get anywhere, but we're going nowhere at the same time. I mean, there's a lot of silent panels with a single like step-by-step actions happening across 5 panels, as opposed to, you know, traversing a character across the scene. It's like the backswing, the swing, and the fall through on a single sword strike, which can have its place as like a punctuation mark at the end of like a sequence, but that's like, you know, the meat and potatoes of the comic, and it feels very dry and slow to me. So
well, I think it depends on how you lay it out, right? It depends on
Yeah.
how the artist lays it. 'Cause they can do it where, I mean, if you lay out your paneling, I feel anyway that you can lay it out to be dry. It's like you know, run up, kick, retaliate, you know, counterattack. You know what I mean?
right,
Yeah, that's kind of boring. But if you I mean, you just kind of flip through. Okay, they're fighting next week, right?
right. Well, I feel
But
like
if you change it up and change like the dynamic of the panels,
right.
then that can really like flow and really like it makes me anyway like want to like follow the path to see exactly how
Right.
it went, what they're crashing into or whatever. You know what I mean?
I think there are comics that do that really well. Like there's like a couple issues of like, depending on the artist, there's a couple like Batman runs where I think they do really well. Like Shang-Chi and Iron Fist also have some things like that where they do it really well, where you're seeing the full fight where, you know, the throwing hand, check hand, counter hand, check that, and then like they, you know, do like full like go through like the full choreography of a fight sequence. However, typically, you know, you'd have dialogue interspersed as like hero mocks villain, villain mocks hero, evil monologue gets discussed at some point in there.
Right.
But
Which is a must.
it's a must. But no, the Dark Souls comic is literally just like if you're watching your friend get slogged down in a really slow dungeon crawl. That's what it feels like. Sitting out and watching your friend get beat up in Dark Souls. I'm like, man, this is kind of like, you know, this isn't really so much as like high gothic adventure as much as just I'm watching someone suffer.
Right. I feel
not-
that,
and not-
and I haven't read it yet, but I feel that it is. They're trying to like give the video game play-by-play, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
As much due as they can.
I think that's and so I run it on for longer, so maybe, you know, it builds some pacing, or just it has a fan base of people who like just no text pages of one person 1v1ing a skeleton. But fix the Shadow Ghost to the Super Bowl. Yeah, of course, it's great with that. So the same. But you know, it kind of so I kind of want to get your guys' thoughts on what do you think are some pitfalls that people might fall into when adapting interactive media into a comic.
Trying to adapt maybe lore to specific games and stuff like that into comics that can just drudge through. You know what I mean?
Yeah, kind of get the
'Cause
opposite problem where
you want to give people lore so they know about the character so they can like relate and fall in love with the character or hate the character, right? But you've given so much lore, you're like, I don't care. Like,
yeah.
That's what I think. Like that's a pitfall, I think.
I think a pitfall is whenever you get a lot of the original creators involved, and the original creators have a really tight rein,
right?
Or some of the actors. I remember we were working on one book back in when we were doing Malibu, and I don't want to go over the title or anything, but it was a movie adaptation, and the actor who played the main character in this just had such a tight thing, that he wanted this, he wanted that, and so likenesses, stuff like that were huge. So you've got that type of thing, where you have like Lucas and stuff. He's very he had his vision, and this is the stuff that contorts to it. J.K. Rowling and her stuff too. It's just a matter of how the how tight of it is and how many revisions and reworks that you have to do because it just doesn't look right to them. And now actually for quite a while you've had a lot of the actors have their likenesses licensed to them, so there's a lot of creative stuff with that, and the portrayal, how they're drawn. So I think those are some of the pitfalls, is making the adaptations true to not only the fans but to the creators as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think while we're talking here, I think my brain finally clicked over to exactly what felt weird about the Dark Souls adaptation, and I can also take this into movie adaptations and important person comics. But I think what happens is the adaptation gets bogged down in retelling the mechanics of the game as opposed to a story set in that same universe. I think if you're adapting something that has, mechanics the player be familiar with, you nod to them, you acknowledge they're there, but you don't get bogged down in fitting them 100%. Kind of referencing back the two D&D movies, the one with Michael Irons, because the mechanics don't exist. This isn't even, we're borrowing some names from D&D, but for the most part, it's like completely different things. It's not even like, it's not even touching it. But with the most recent one, there were nods to mechanics, but they weren't tied down to them, like having the druid wild shape so many times in one sequence. Can a druid wild shape that many times in that sequence? Probably not.
Okay,
but
so
a druid can.
Mechanically, no, right? They get like 1 or 2 wild shapes.
Yeah, 1 or 2 wild shapes a day every single level, but acknowledging that wild shape exists, this is how it works. Right. But for the sake of story, we're going a little bit beyond that. Which is
you have to take, I know, like in comics as a whole, we have to embrace the suspension of disbelief, right?
Yeah.
But in that particular movie, you just have to just roll along with it. Like, okay, listen, don't worry about the mechanics, just enjoy the movie because it really is a good movie. I'll say that all day long.
Yeah, but it's the thing where you nod at the mechanics and then you walk on by and tell your story.
That's right.
Yeah. Whereas I think with Dark Souls, what the issue was is they, no, you're gonna light attack, dodge, light attack, heavy attack, dodge, parry, and we need to capture that in every panel. And I think I got a little bit bogged down. Whereas something like with The Witcher does something closer to what the new D&D movie does, where the Witcher comic is you have swordplay, you have word sign, like hand signs and stuff, and walk all day there and do stuff with that, and the potion crafting. We'll nod at all that, and then we'll walk on by and tell the rest of our story.
Right.
Yeah. Pathfinder, the comics also do that really well in terms of similarly, where these are all these things that exist in the handbook, but for the sake of telling the story and creating good visuals, we're going to take what we can from those and leave the things that would make us take way too long to tell a story.
You can't stick to the mechanics like I said, when you mentioned about Pathfinder or Dungeons and Dragons, anything that's a tabletop game of some sort, you kind of just let it go for the sake of the story.
Yeah. And I have no idea, so I'll ask you on this since you have. On the Vampire the Masquerade comics, are there moments like that where you think they handled referencing the source material really well, but went on to tell its own story, referencing, mesmerism or different things, but didn't necessarily get bogged down in the,
So in regards to the ones I said, because I didn't read the one that was up that you had up there. That's freaking awesome. I'm gonna have to pick it up. But in regards to Crimson Thaw, I thought it stayed pretty close to the source material in regards to not necessarily the working of the mechanics, right? Because you kind of have to push that away. Really, just push that away. Appreciate what they're trying to do with the story that they're having. It was kind of we're going to incorporate comic books to help tell the backstories of certain characters that you're gonna hear talk about in the books, right? In the books. So it was neat to see them use that route as opposed to trying to introduce them in the source books.
Right.
But it was, I mean, I think they did pretty well, fairly well. I mean,
Okay.
I wasn't confused. It didn't confuse me in that, oh no, I can't, I don't understand where they're at. I don't understand what they're doing. It was pretty solid.
Sure. Definitely.
New characters, and part of the characters also like kind of transitioned into the video game. Was it Swan Song? I think is the computer game for Vampire the Masquerade.
Yes.
That's based off the 5th edition books as well.
Yeah.
So that was pretty cool. I like that.
Have you been following along with the news, not news, for Bloodlines 2?
No. I did watch some stuff about was it Werewolf? Like some shenanigans that was happening with Werewolf.
Yeah, so Werewolf announced, but no, they announced a sequel to the Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines game from however long ago.
Right.
And they announced that, and then it's just been kind of silent since then. We're getting like little updates, but it's weird how little we're hearing about it since the announcement.
Bloodlines, I thought was pretty good. There's another one. Was it Blood Hunt?
Blood Hunt?
That was a game.
Yeah.
Blood
the Battle Royale, which is.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it was.
Yeah. But I mean, and then I guess we get into like this weird thing of the fact that there is also a Fortnite comic, which. Which has an adaptation, and its fans like it, but you're adapting a game that has the core conceit of the game is that there's no story. It's go in and build and survive.
And shoot everyone,
yeah.
But they've incorporated. I think there's a Fortnite with Marvel, right?
Yes.
Marvel and DC.
Yep.
Yeah. There's one for DC as well. I was pretty sure there's one with Marvel. I remember a cover with Wolverine on it.
Yeah, there's a mixture of a few titles that have DC and Marvel.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the since the old Marvel DC crossover, the only thing that brought that back was Fortnite.
I believe that. I did like the Marvel crossover, by the way. The Marvel and DC crossover, Amalgam Comics. I'm pretty sure I have all of those. I thought they were cool. I might be the only one though.
No, I think I have some of those. I still have. I know I had some at the time, but
right.
I think I still have those. I have to go through and recatalog everything I've got.
Dude, you were not the only one. I have so many comics, and I can't even. I'm right now.
Well, I've tried to set things new. I stopped collecting for a while, and then I started up, a couple of years ago, friend's comic shop, and ever since I restarted, I've been, pretty much on myself to get everything, cataloged as I get it every week and all that. But I have just things, boxes of comics that went from my house to my parents' house, back to my house, and all this from years. And it's just a lot of the stuff I've tried numerous times trying to do that. At one point I had something like 60 short boxes of comics.
Wow.
And I got rid of a lot of the filler stuff and that, but I still have, the main stuff like my X-Men and a lot of my independent Aliens and Predator, Dark Horse stuff, Grendel, obviously, Mage, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I tended to thin out a lot of the stuff. And, when I was working for Marvel in Malibu, one of the perks of being there was we would get the shipments as they came out. It would be comic day, and here's multiple comics versions of the stuff, and you'd find the stuff that you worked on, so you'd have versions to hand out to people and stuff like that. So I tended to get a lot of filler stuff from there, a lot of stuff that I didn't read or things like that. So a lot of that stuff I kind of weeded down, but I still have a lot that I need to catalog and go through. I mean, there's stuff I know I have, but it's just these ones, and with all the different sub-series, and
Right.
being heavy X-Men collector, all of the 4-issue miniseries stuff like that, and those things just take a lot of stuff to catalog all that. So sorry to detract from our topic here.
Tangents are kind of what we're known for, so I mean, it's all good.
I was gonna say that's kind of what we do. It's all right.
Yeah. We got actually, since you mentioned X-Men first, that takes one off our bingo cards. We'll have to add X-Men in general to the Tuesday bingo
Right.
card. We got Vampire Masquerade in there. Haven't mentioned Halo yet, or boxing.
X-Men. What was it 80s, 90s X-Men?
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of funny
Del
because
Taco.
it's kind of funny because I was just in my comic store, and they just released they just released some reissues of books. So they just released Avengers #1 with all the original ads and all this stuff, and
Nice.
Strange Tales, the first Adam Warlock. With
What are those?
178, I think. But then also they just released the Jim Lee X-Men #1. So I'm like sitting there going, okay, I understand release
ones?
the what?
The Mutant Milestone?
Yeah, I think so. They're
Like the gatefold cover one?
Yeah. So yeah, they just reproduced that, and I'm thinking, when I think a lot of these ones, doing with original ads, it makes sense for the Avengers and Strange Tales and stuff like that. But then you turn around and you go X-Men 1. I'm like, yeah, I think I have multiple copies of that from when I collected them back then.
Yeah.
But I guess it's great for people who have come on board more recently and give them the chance. And I know in talking to my friend that that they sell very, very well. They're very popular. So it's just kind of weird for me. We're talking about the comics, the X-Men stuff, and all that. How I just had this experience of this one that I wouldn't think would be a classic one, but it is it due to its popularity and stuff. So.
Okay, well, we are coming up on an hour here, so I'll get into our final questions. Final question is going to be, if you could either, what would be your dream project to work on in terms of adapting a comic or a game to a comic? What would be your thing to either see someone else put out or work on yourself? I'll start with, because unfortunately mine's taken, but maybe if they adapt the rest of the series, potentially maybe I could get it in there. But mine is.
What are you talking about? Someone's making a Combo Man comic?
Right. Well, unfortunately, there's not a game yet, so maybe if I get hired as the writer for a Combo Man game. But
you start from the beginning, man. You
Yes.
make the Combo Man comic, and then they'll make a game, and then you can work on both.
Right. Well, I need to find some way to get the rights to Combo Man, or get Marvel to boom me onto it, and then I just But no, Metal Gear Solid, favorite game franchise all time. MGS 1 and 2 were already adapted into a comic, and in a way that I think would not work, because it is pretty much a straight one-to-one retelling, but for whatever reason it just works so well. And the art is done by Ashley Wood from Australia, and it is just, I've already mentioned several times that I'm a fan of hyper stylized art, and it is hyper stylized to the nth degree, in that it all just looks like pencil sketching, and the storytelling is phenomenal, which is weird for something that is supposed to be like a 1-to-1 adaptation.
That seems like very like monotone coloring too.
Yeah, and then there's a cool feel. They do moments where they have like cool things where they shade with like contrasting colors, or they'll do like color blocks. I'm trying to find something in here. There you go. Like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we were to do like, an adaptation of Metal Gear Solid 3 or 4, that would be my dream project to work on. So with Ashley Wood as the artist, because him and Rocky Kim share like the #1 spot in my heart as far as art style goes.
Nice.
So for you guys, what would be your dream project to work on as in any capacity for a game that turned into a comic?
Okay, this is gonna sound really weird.
Sure.
And you know what? This is another. Well, this one was a comic that kind of got turned into a game, right? And then back to a comic. Was it Wolf Among Us?
Oh yeah.
It's based off of Bixby. You know what I mean?
Right.
Big Bad Wolf. Because if you know anything about the comic book Fable, it's about like the different story, like Big Bad Wolf with Little Red Riding Hood and Snow White and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And I know they were kind of making a sequel to Wolf Among Us, and that is definitely a book that I would love to work on. Like as a dream project, from video game to book, that would be it.
Okay. And David, what about you?
Two game things, two game series that I'd like to do. I know they've done stuff in the past, but I really enjoy the Zelda stuff.
Okay.
So I think that would be very fun to do. And then I also really like the Final Fantasy stuff. The whole gamut. Some I'm a little less enthusiastic about. For example, 9, not that enthusiastic, but
sure.
Obviously, 7 had some really cool stuff. And the 14, some great stuff. I also like 8, so yeah, there's some stuff I think that would be kind of cool to do if it was done right. But I'm doing coloring, so it would obviously have to have the right penciler for it, and inker. But it would be fun to do. Those would be kind of really fun projects for me to do.
I definitely especially 8 and 14 would be just some absolutely some of the things you could color in that would be some absolutely fantastic things there in terms of coloring goes. 15 and 7 can get a little gray on gray at times, but 8's my personal favorite. But yeah, the Final Fantasy in general just has some great design, so I imagine coloring that would be amazing.
Yeah, I think it would be kind of a pain to do, but think about coloring a Marlboro.
Yeah,
I think that would be really good, and some of the flame effects that you could do with the Freet. But with the amount of work that Square puts into it, they leave they do an amazing job as it is.
Yeah,
so.
That'd be fantastic. Yeah. That'd be dope. Okay. Well, that has been That's Everyone's Show on Tuesday. Do we have any final thoughts for our audience?
Let Del Taco know that we will gladly take their sponsorship.
Yes.
Just want to throw that out there. That's on our bingo card too.
Yep. Del Taco, please sponsor us. What if we did an adaptation of Del Taco?
right?
Yes. Del
You
Taco
like
comic.
the Howard and Kumar Go to White Castle version, only for Del Taco.
Yes. Yeah.
We might have to make
Well,
that.
wasn't it? Was his name Dan? Who was the original Del Taco guy in the commercials?
Oh, wow, jeez.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, the second most search thing in Google is Del Taco commercial guy.
Nice.
Keon Marcel,
That's the actor, right?
actor featuring Dan.
Dan. Yeah.
Dan the Del Taco guy. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that in the day. It hasn't been around for quite a while, but it was.
That's funny.
There's some interesting stuff.
Yeah.
So
I have never eaten there, but I mean, I'm hearing raves from people, and I have to go still. Tim and I were supposed to go last time he was over here.
Didn't you go with us when I was down there?
No, because I couldn't make it to go to Kablam.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, we had
I was so mad.
Yeah, we took the group after Daytona to go to Del Taco, but you couldn't make it.
usually when people come out here, they want to go to like In-N-Out and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
that's the nice thing though is there's Del Tacos everywhere, so no matter where we go with Jose, the line won't be that bad. Yeah.
One of the places that I miss, sorry, as we're talking about places, is when I lived for a short term in Austin was Whataburgers. I used to go to Whataburgers. I don't know if are there any in that area, Jose?
I think they're just in Texas.
They're not where we are. No, I just above it too. I remember going back home to Indiana and stopping at Whataburger.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
I know they're more Midwest, but I didn't think they. Yeah. Sorry, mid east, mid central,
mid
central. Yeah,
mid central. Yeah, but
I know my favorite place growing up was a place called Penguin Point, and it was just like this greasy. Not so much a greasy spoon. I mean, they had aspirations to be like McDonald's, but they were never that big. But it was my first job and my first place to eat. I had a sandwich named after me, and now it's closed.
Yeah.
Oh, it broke my heart.
That's
I know. Yeah, if Jose ever comes out west to LA, you have to go to Pink's Hot Dogs. It's just a hot dog, but that is the brand name.
Nice.
Yeah.
Actually, I am stoked because in Oregon we just got Dave's Hot Chicken up here.
Nice.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that.
Yeah, it's newer-ish. They just recently started blowing up, but it is a California thing. I think it was just like 1 or 2 locations, and then Drake and then Samuel Jackson ended up going there, raved about it on their social media and stuff, and then of course everyone then started going there, and they got a huge influx. But I mean, it was good. And we finally got one up here, but of course the line was absolutely insane because.
Well, of course.
Yeah. But yeah.
I was so happy we got crumble cookie here.
Crumble cookies. Oh yeah.
Like we had one, and it had coming soon. And it was like, I swear, it felt like 3 years before it finally got here. It was only like probably a few months, but. It finally opened, and I'm just about to go into a diabetic coma. It's fantastic.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, Crumble Cookie also, like, working in marketing. Crumble Cookie's marketing is, like, a tour de force. The one thing that I yell at people at is, focus on the product. Right. The product should be good enough to market itself. And Crumble Cookies gets that, and so all their ads are just fun, stuff, but centered around the cookie, centered around the product. Not like, you get car commercials where they're telling the setup of like a family drama, and they're like, no, it's actually a Kia ad.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I like was it the Sonic ads? The Sonic ads where they have the guys talking in the car. Like every ad is them talking in the car about something dumb.
Yeah. Yeah. They had one recently. where it was two women sitting there, and one of them is taking forever on the mobile app trying to get their order placed.
Nice.
It's really smart, dude. You get the product in there, but you also get the levels of desirability and all that fun stuff. Yeah, that's psychology. That's a whole other podcast episode. This has been that Silverline Show on Tuesday. We'll be back next Tuesday with. Let me pull up my calendar here. I also need to get some new things scheduled shortly. And next week we are talking about we're talking about comic collectibles. So it's kind of going over not just collecting comics, but all the collectibles around comic culture and all that fun stuff.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll be talking about that. So we'll be back then. Make sure to check out the Wednesday Wham and Summer Sunday show at 8 p.m. Eastern on those days.
We have a Kickstarter coming.
We have a Kickstarter.
Was it in a week or so?
In a week or so, yeah, we'll probably have it featured on our episode.
Yay!
I'll see you guys then. But until that time,
make mine Silverline.
Make mine Silverline.
Where'd the thing go?
Hi, I'm Bill Black. I created FemForce. But you know what? Today, make mine Silverline.